was a soft, quiet evening. Raindrops slid lazily down the glass panes, and thunder grumbled low in the distance like an old man talking to himself. Kaizer sat in his room, a warm blanket wrapped around his shoulders, his fingertips curled around a cup of cinnamon tea, the kind of evening that asked you to slow down, to sit with your thoughts. But that was the problem. Kaizer's thoughts hadn't been kind to him lately. 4 weeks now, he'd been haunted by a creeping feeling, like something was stuck. No matter how hard he tried, nothing seemed to move forward. His freelance jobs were inconsistent, money felt tight, and worse, he kept replaying the same self-doubt in his mind. Maybe this is it. Maybe you've already peaked. Maybe you're just average. The words weren't loud, but they repeated themselves in different ways. Every time he tried to apply for something new, start a fresh project, even reach out to someone, those whispers would slip in and pull him back. That night, while scrolling through his bookshelf for distraction, a title caught his eye. It was a gift from someone he barely spoke to now, The Power of Your Subconscious Mind by Dr. Joseph Murphy. He opened the first chapter, not expecting much, but by the third page, he sat up straighter. The book wasn't complicated. In fact, it was almost too simple, but in that simplicity was something powerful. It said, your subconscious mind accepts whatever you repeatedly say to it. It doesn't argue. It simply acts. Kaizer blinked. He read it again and again. He started remembering all the little things he'd been telling himself lately, not out loud, but through his thoughts, his reactions, his habits. I'm not lucky. I can't afford that. Things never work out for me. He hadn't meant to program himself that way, but he had. Dr. Murphy explained that the subconscious doesn't know the difference between imagination and reality. It believes what it's fed, and Kaizer had been feeding it worry, fear, and doubt like clockwork. He sat back, heart a little faster now. For the first time in a while, he didn't feel defeated. He felt curious. Could it really be that his thoughts were creating his world? That night, before bed, Kaizer tried something new. He looked into the dark window pane, his reflection barely visible through the rain, and he said softly, everything I need is already inside me. Things are working out for me, even when I can't see it. He felt silly, but he said it again, and then he slept. The next morning, he didn't wake up to a miracle, but he felt different, lighter, calmer. He repeated the same words again before his morning tea. And when he got a message later that day, a small freelance gig that someone had forgotten to confirm weeks ago, he smiled. Maybe it was luck. Maybe it was the book. Or maybe, for the first time, he was shifting the conversation inside his own mind. The sky was still heavy with clouds. Kaizer had always liked the rain, but lately he welcomed it like an old friend. Something about the soft rhythm on the window, the smell of wet pavement, and the way time seemed to slow down. It gave him space to think, to feel, to change. A week had passed since he began speaking gently to his subconscious. It had felt awkward at first, standing by the mirror or whispering into the quiet of his room. But he had kept going, because something was happening. It wasn't magic, not the kind with sparkles and sudden riches, but it was something deeper, like someone had cleaned a foggy window in his mind, and now he could finally see possibilities where he once saw walls. That evening, he came home after a difficult conversation. A friend had mocked one of his ideas, a simple project Kaizer was planning to launch. Nothing big, just a cozy little newsletter or maybe a podcast where he could talk about books, about life, about growth. Bro, who even listens to stuff like that? The friend had laughed. No offense, but that's not really your thing. In the past, Kaizer would have swallowed that comment, pretended it didn't sting, maybe even quietly shelved the idea. But not tonight, because this time, he caught it, the voice in his head trying to replay those words over and over. And instead of letting it take root, he paused. He remembered a line from the book. You are the gardener. Your thoughts are the seeds. You can grow flowers or you can grow weeds. Kaizer closed his eyes. He imagined his mind like a little garden, and he saw it, clear as day, The words of that friend trying to plant themselves like sharp, fast-growing weeds. So he decided to plant something else. He whispered, just under his breath, "I believe in small beginnings. I trust my ideas. My voice has value." Then he sat down with his notebook and made a list, all the topics he could talk about, stories he wanted to share, books that had changed him. He wrote for an hour without stopping, and when he looked back at the pages, messy, scratched, hopeful, he smiled. Maybe he wasn't an expert. Maybe no one would listen at first. But his subconscious didn't care about maybe. It cared about repetition. Kaizer remembered another part of the book, about how the subconscious responds best to emotion, not just words, but how deeply you feel them. So every time he spoke his affirmations, he tried to feel them in his bones. I am capable. I am learning, growing, and improving. Everything I need is already within me. The next day, during a walk in the drizzle, a message popped up on his phone. A stranger had liked an old piece he posted months ago and sent a reply. "This made my day. Do you write more like this somewhere?" Kaizer stood there in the rain for a moment. The message wasn't life-changing, but it was proof that when you change your inner story, your outer world begins to shift, gently, patiently, like the clouds parting after a long rain. It had been raining on and off for days now. Kaizer didn't mind. In fact, he had grown to love the rhythm of it, the way it softened the noise of the outside world, the way it invited him to go inward, to listen more closely. That evening, he sat by the kitchen window, steam rising from a mug of lemon ginger tea. His notebook was open, filled with pages of small victories. A message he'd sent that got a positive reply. A new connection he made. A day where he felt genuinely proud of his effort, even if no one noticed. They were little things, but Kaizer was learning that little things mattered, especially when repeated. He had reached a chapter in the book that talked about the power of imagination, not just daydreaming, but visualizing vividly the life you want as if it's already yours. The subconscious doesn't know the difference between what's real and what's vividly imagined, it read. Kaizer closed the book and leaned back. He looked at the drops racing down the glass and let his mind wander. He imagined waking up early, excited, a creative morning routine. Writing, recording, building. A growing community around his content. People sending messages saying things like, "I needed to hear this today." He imagined his room transformed, better lighting, a microphone, a second screen. He pictured his bank account stable, steady, supporting the life he wanted. Then he smiled, because for the first time, this didn't feel far away. It felt familiar. That night, instead of just saying affirmations like before, he added something new, visualization. He let himself feel what it would be like to already live that life. Not wishful thinking, but confident expectation. He remembered a part of the book that said, "The subconscious is moved by belief, and belief is created through repetition, emotion, and vivid imagery." So he kept at it. One day, during a stormy morning when he didn't feel like doing anything, Kaizer heard that old voice again, the one that said, "You're wasting your time." But this time, he didn't fight it. He just returned to his habit. He sat down, opened his notebook, and wrote, "I create with purpose. My work has value. I'm already becoming who I'm meant to be." Later that afternoon, something small but strange happened. A former client he hadn't heard from in 6 months reached out. They had a quick project, paid well, needed it soon, and they'd thought of him first. Coincidence? Maybe. But Kaizer didn't think so. He had learned that the subconscious works like a silent assistant behind the scenes, opening doors, nudging ideas, pulling people toward your path when your beliefs are aligned with your desires. That evening, while the sky turned to charcoal and the first thunder rolled in, Kaizer lit a candle and whispered to himself, "I'm not waiting anymore. I'm living it one quiet step at a time." And outside, the rain nodded in agreement. The rain hadn't let up all day. The sky hung low and gray, with clouds soaked and swollen, while the quiet hum of rainfall filled every corner of Kaizer's small apartment. A blanket was draped over his shoulders like a cape. His tea sat forgotten and cold, and the window was fogged with his slow, steady breath. Today, Kaizer felt heavy, not sad, just full. His mind had been swirling with thoughts about progress, about how far he'd come, and how easy it still was to fall into the trap of measuring success by numbers, clicks, messages, and money. A part of him wanted results now, proof, validation, but something inside whispered gently, trust the root before the fruit. He reached for the book again, The Power of Your Subconscious Mind. The pages had folded corners, highlights, and little scribbles in the margins. Tonight, he flipped to a chapter about faith. You must believe in the outcome you desire, not with fear, but with calm expectancy. It read. That line stayed with him. Kaizer realized he still had fear, not the loud kind, but the quiet one that crept in when no one was watching. The fear that maybe he was pretending to believe, that all this inner work was just a mask over old doubt. He leaned back and closed his eyes. What would it feel like to believe completely? To live as if success wasn't a question, but timeline? He imagined it. His content gaining slow, steady traction, his income growing bit by bit, and a small audience who understood, stayed, and cared. He let that feeling wrap around him like the blanket. The book explained that the subconscious accepts what you impress upon it with deep feeling, especially right before sleep or in moments of stillness. So Kaizer did something simple. He sat in silence, hands resting on his chest, and whispered slowly, I am safe to believe. My path is unfolding. Everything I've imagined is already coming to me. He repeated it, not frantically, not desperately, just gently. Then, like every night, he visualized the messages, the growth, the new opportunities, and the peaceful mornings when he woke with purpose. A week later, on a different rainy afternoon, he received an email from someone who had been quietly watching, a subscriber who said, Your stories calm me. Please keep making them. They help. It wasn't a viral comment, a sponsorship, or money, but it was fate returning to him in someone else's words. Kaizer sat back, smiling to himself. He was learning that when you align belief with imagination and speak with conviction, the subconscious begins to sculpt your world without resistance. No rush, no panic, just rain, stillness, and steady becoming. The rain had softened into a quiet drizzle by the end of the week. The clouds still loomed above the rooftops, but there was light now, a faint golden hue breaking through the gray, casting soft reflections on puddles below. The city felt slower than usual, the kind of slow that invited you to pause, to breathe. Kaizer stood by the open window, holding a warm mug of cocoa. The air smelled like wet earth and memory. He was thinking, not in that overthinking way he used to, but gently, peacefully. He had just finished the last chapter of the book, and instead of closing it with a dramatic sigh or some urgent plan, he simply smiled. It had seeped into him, like the rain soaking through the roots beneath the surface. The ideas had become part of him. He wasn't looking for signs anymore. He was creating them. Kaizer had learned that the subconscious isn't some mystical, unreachable thing. It's always listening, shaping, reflecting, adjusting. But you have to be the one who tells it what to believe. And that belief, it had to be consistent, patient, gentle, like watering a seed without digging it up every morning to see if it's grown. That evening, something happened. Kaizer received a reply from a person he had long admired, a bigger creator whose content had helped him early on. The message wasn't elaborate, just a short note. Love what you're doing. Keep going. He leaned back in his chair, the sound of soft rain pattering outside. Not long ago, he would have screenshotted that message, rushed to tell someone, used it as proof that he was finally on the way. But not tonight. Tonight, it felt natural, like it belonged. He remembered a line from the book. When you realize the power of your subconscious, you will live in a world of belief, not struggle. That was it. Kaizer wasn't trying anymore. He was being. He still had goals, of course, but they weren't rooted in panic or desperation. They grew from stillness now, from a quiet, unshakable trust that everything was unfolding as it should. He had his affirmations written on a small card taped to his wall. He whispered them before sleep. He visualized before beginning each creative task. He caught himself when negative thoughts tried to sneak in, and he gently replaced it with better ones, not because he was forcing optimism, but because he had trained his inner voice to serve him, not scare him. The transformation wasn't loud. It didn't come with confetti or applause or sudden fame. It came with peace. Kaizer walked to the kitchen, filled his glass, and looked at the window again. A small stream of water traced a slow path down the glass, steady, certain, effortless. And that was him now, too, flowing, aligned, becoming. He didn't need signs anymore. He was the sign,